And now, it's time for TJwow.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and also when you are listening to this recording. Welcome to the Training Journal live online panel discussion. This is me, I'm your host, I'm the Deputy Editor of Training Journal. My name is Jo. This is a picture of me at the Training Journal Awards last year, all glammed up, the one time of the year I wear a dress. And I'm looking forward, it's 21 days until our next TJ Awards, where we celebrate loads of L&D success. Really looking forward to that coming up. What is today about? Well, today is all about conversation. The late, great Jay Cross said this, and he said that conversation is the most powerful learning technology ever invented. And that is how we've set up our conversation today. There's no PowerPoint presentations. It's all about us guys having a chat together. And speaking of which, that's what the chat window is for. Please use that anytime. Chat with each other, network, share your Twitter handles, share your LinkedIn names and addresses, share blogs that you've written, podcasts that you've heard, research that you've picked up, or if you want to, you can just be really quiet, sit in the background and listen. It's entirely up to you. We've also got a question and answer panel. Now, I do my best to look at that chat window and keep a note on the things that you're saying and asking. If you have a question for me, or more importantly, for our panel, or just want to air something and talk about it, use that question and answer panel at the bottom of your screen. That is the absolute best way to guarantee that I will 100% see your question. So do use that if you want to. Now, if you're thinking, actually, I've got something on Twitter that I want to share, then go ahead, use #TJwow. It's a really great way to go and share a learning nugget or a snippet. And we have John Kennard with us in the chat. He is going to be doing all of our tweeting today. And he is also our editor. So if you want to pitch an article or share something or do a blog for us, there's his email address. Go and have a chat with him. He would love to hear from you. And he says in the chat, hello all. Okay, so you know that all of our Training Journal webinars are recorded. They are available online, and you can go and have a look at any of the recordings anytime. Go and share them with your colleagues. All great learning, absolutely fabulous. And at this point, I think it's about time that we got to know our speakers. We are really pleased today that we've got three fabulous people, really different experiences, different angles. We have Stephen, we have Steph, and we have Chris. And what I'm going to do now is bring their videos onto the screen, and we're going to start saying hello to them. So I like to give them that warning just in case they're blowing their nose at this point. But here we are, let's bring them on screen. And we can have a little hello with them all. Hello, everyone. So let's find out a bit more about our speakers. We're going to speak to Stephen, Chris, then Steph, and find out who are you and what is it that you do. So, Stephen, let's get you unmuted. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Good.
loud and clear.
So I'm Stephen Flurry, and I look after the learning team over at the East of England Co-op. And I've been here for about 5 years now. And we obviously look after the whole of all the business lines for the co-op, which is a really interesting mix. I have food retail through to funerals. We have a property business, opticians, pharmacies, and a few others. I won't carry on mentioning them. 11 different business lines. And when I left to come and join the co-op, my colleagues said that should be a nice, easy role for you. It's turned out to be very interesting.
Yeah, we've had various people from the co-op speak at Training Journal events over the years, and you guys have done amazing work, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. Thank you, Stephen. And Chris, let's come to you. Let's get you unmuted, Chris, and find out a little bit more about you. No, we're not quite there, Chris. Let me unmute you. I'll do that for you. There you go. Try again.
Is it working now?
Yes, let's go.
I'm Chris Robinson. I'm a chartered marketer by trade. That's from the Chartered Institute of Marketing. I'm the founder and managing director of a company called Boost Marketing, so a very niche marketing agency, and we specialise in awards, so big fans of the TJ Awards, lots of HR and training awards amongst the 1,200 awards we've won for our clients. And we've also got a subsidiary called Boost Evaluation, so I'm very interested in learning analytics and learning evaluation as well.
Brilliant, thank you, Chris. So really focusing on awards. A little bit quiet there, Chris. We've been playing with Chris's microphone a little bit, so I don't know whether you can move that a bit closer to you, Chris, or do that setup change that we did in the software earlier on, but we'll come back to you in a moment. And Steph, tell us all about yourself. Oh, Steph, we have to get you unmuted. Oh, or maybe you're not even connected. You see, this is the trouble with tests. You do your test at 9 a.m. and it all falls apart by 10 a.m. So, Steph, just go to that microphone at top left of the screen and click on that. It should go green. We should be able to say hello. And whilst you're doing that, Chris, let's just check your audio, see if it's a bit louder. You were saying something about how many awards you've helped people with?
We started almost exactly the same time as your awards program, and so 2006. And since then, we've helped us win over 1,200. Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Over 1,200 awards, that's pretty awesome. And that's in 10, 11 years, I think the TJ Awards has been running. And Steph, we can hear you now, I think.
Yeah.
There you go.
Sorry about that.
That's no problem. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, Steph.
Well, hi everybody. My name's Steph Scott and I am Content Marketing Manager for Good Practice. I'm coming to you from cold and frosty Edinburgh this morning. So Good Practice, we are a provider of online learning solutions. We've got our award-winning online toolkit, and we also do lots of custom and off-the-shelf e-learning for lots of different clients, big, small, all different sectors of industry, work with some really great brands. And in terms of my role, my job is really to help raise the profile of the business, you know, through great content, through marketing, to get people interested in Good Practice, help them understand how we can help them solve their L&D challenges, and do quite a lot of work with clients as well in terms of helping them understand what they've bought from us and how they can help position it in their organisation and maximise the value.
Wonderful, thank you. Really looking forward to picking on your experience and what we can learn from that. So let's go round again, Stephen, Chris and Steph, and find out what are your first opening thoughts to our question today. So our opening question is marketing, learning and development in your organisation. How and why? It's a little bit broad. So Stephen, what are your first thoughts to get our chat window into things today?
Well, when I first arrived here at the co-op, I guess this will resonate with people, possibly, but I got here and we had a culture of learning was just something that happened to people. It wasn't really owned by the business, but it was owned by HR, and most of it was just policy and compliance. So it was just something that happened to people, and when it did happen, it was normally a tick box exercise. It was normally seen as something that was being pushed out from the centre to our colleagues. And what we really wanted to be, from an L&D point of view, is really part of the commercial business, rather than order takers, for us to be trusted by the business and for them to come to us with real business problems, rather than just coming to us and asking for a course. So that was the journey we wanted to go on, and we really wanted to do that because we wanted the people, the learners and colleagues in the business, to be able to go out and seek out their own learning and take a bit of ownership and take responsibility for it, whereas, you know, for the most part, people were just waiting to be told what the next compliance course was going to be. So for us, it was really important. We wanted to build a brand where people could, you know, relate to that and know they would get quality and know that was the right place to go to develop their skills and the skills of their people.
Really love that, Stephen. Thank you. And it's that classic tale of going from order takers to making that really good impact on the business. So looking forward to hearing more about that. And I know there's lots of good stuff that you've done. Thank you, Stephen. And Chris, what's your take on this point about marketing L&D in your organisation?
I think there are a number of challenges, and I'd like to break it into three different groups. I mean, with my background is marketing. I'd look at there's three challenges, three strands and work streams. First is the culture of learning that Stephen was talking about. Marketing themselves, make people appreciate the value of learning, really get engaged in the act of learning, have a culture of learning where people try to learn and want to learn. And that's challenge. That requires a whole strategy to challenges 2 and 3. And challenges 2 is like a commercial strategy, as Stephen was saying. It's marketing to customers, and the customers aren't necessarily the broader organisation, but whether it's an HR business partner, line manager, or someone's supervisor, or a training colleague. But it's actually a lot of stakeholders that you need to market to get them to send people to your training, and that's often down to how would that would be often evidence of effectiveness, of value adding. It's worth taking them out of the role. The third one is the senior leadership, and this is where I think the learning and development function struggles the most, is to prove their value and get big budgets and get support from senior leaders. I think a lot of when we write up award submissions about learning, it's clear that if you have a CEO who is absolutely supportive of learning, then it's no trouble, and it's a big part of the story that they'll open sessions, they'll be featured in the internal comms. But I think it's, for most companies, the impression I get is it's a challenge, and you have to fight tooth and nail to get their support and their budget. So I think that's a third challenge, and that's all about the other favourite topic of mine from awards, which is evaluation, which is to show that your actual development activities are aligned to the business and delivering impact on the business. And that's a very different challenge, and I think where the L&D community has the most scope to raise its game, in my view.
Yeah, some really great stuff there, Chris. Thank you. And I really appreciate what you're saying about evaluation, aligning to the business. I judged on one of the TJ Awards last year, and one of the things that really hit me, and I wrote about this in the magazine, was the lack of business impact. It's just like, we had 73,000 people attend. Don't care. What did they do with it afterwards? I think one person even told us about the business impact it had on their own business as a sales kind of business, as a vendor. It's like, no, that's not quite what we're looking for.
All right.
Nigel
Number one
says,
is
Chris, can you repeat the 1 and 2 as you broke up a little bit,
internal
please?
comms exercise, promoting the training activities, especially if they're not mandatory. Okay, so compliance and mandatory training is fine, but a lot of training is voluntary, especially e-learning, which is obviously Steph's challenge, is often getting content up there. And then the second community is the internal customers, so sponsors and stakeholders like managers and supervisors and various technical champions around the business who have to choose you. Often the internal function is competing against external courses as well. So you need to sell yourselves to them as customers and have a much more commercial mindset. So
thank you very much. And so hopefully that's cleared that up for you there, Nigel. And as we were speaking, some of the things coming through the chat window, Rachel has said, this really resonates with me. I struggle with people leaving it up to me to push L&D rather than the ideal of them pulling on my expertise for L&D. So there's a bit of a shift there that you're working on at Rachel. Con says L&D needs to learn how to celebrate business outcomes and be part of the euphoria, which Rachel really likes as well. And yeah, Chris is giving you that thumbs up there, Con, and I know that's something that Con really pushes a lot. And he adds, celebrate the so what of learning, which is what we're talking about there. Zara says, I'm in a junior role, and this is how things are at my organisation. HR loving mandatory training and L&D being order takers. How would you try to get through to more experienced people? So we'll come back to that question in a moment, Zara. I'm going to make a note of that and come back to it because I don't want to ignore Steph. So Steph, let's come to you. And I've unmuted you, Steph. What is your take on this kind of around the marketing of L&D, how and why?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question that you've asked for the webinar today. And for me, there's kind of two ways that we can look at it. So there's the whole piece about marketing your L&D function as a whole, as a brand within your organisation. And there's also the marketing of individual L&D programs, initiatives, courses, all of the individual solutions, and how we kind of amplify and make more noise about what L&D is doing in an organisation. And I think there's definitely value and, benefit in, firstly, marketing your L&D function, and also marketing those individual activities. And I'm interested to know a bit more from the participants that are here today. What are they most interested in finding out about? Do you want to raise the profile of L&D as a whole in terms of, solidifying what you stand for, or is it more about how do I actually make some more noise around, get some more traction and people interested in the specific, learning initiatives and courses and interventions? Because for me, the goal of marketing and L&D is often quite similar. We're really encouraging people to invest their time in us, to invest in our products, to invest in our services, and marketing can really help us get into the mindsets of learners. If we're thinking of learners as customers, that's a really important kind of mindset to get into when you're thinking about, how to sort of raise the profile of all the good work that we're doing in L&D.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Steph. And Paul has said in the chat, love the distinction between the function and the resources. Push and pull marketing in a nutshell from Steph. So thank you for that clarification there. Stephen, let's come to you on this question. So this was from Zara, and Zara had said that she's in a junior role. And her question was, how would you try to get through to more experienced people that actually this order taking is a detrimental approach? The marketing, it also heads towards book now, it's mandatory anyway. So Stephen, you've gone from this order taker to a slightly different way of working. What insight can you help Zara and everybody else here with today? Oh, Stephen, let me unmute you. We've got some muting gremlins today, but it's right. We'll sort it out.
Maybe
I think we're there, Stephen.
And I've been off mute all that time. Yeah, that's a really good question, and yeah, again, I can remember having those conversations in the early days with some of the key stakeholders, and I think the thing that really moved us along that journey, there was a few things really, but one of the main things was becoming part of the business. So we really wanted to learn how to talk the business's language, and we made a decision really early on to try not to use L&D or learning measures and just stick to using the measures of our business partners and the commercial guys. But that meant really for us getting out there and being part of their business, attending commercial meetings. My team were out on the road with commercial managers, visiting sites, and we still do a lot of that. And we collect stories, the real life stories from the field. So that was one part really. And you talked about the TJ Awards last year. We were lucky enough to win a couple of awards. It was great, and we happened to bring one of the CEOs with us and one of the senior leader for retail, because they've been so involved and integral in the work that we've done. They felt like they owned the program, so we got some good buy-in there. So that's the other side of that, is bringing the business into L&D. So through the initial performance consulting with the business on business issues, which is a process that we live and die by. It's great, through to making the people from the field the stars of the training interventions. So every single one of our courses contains video footage from the CEOs through to the customer service assistants on the tills, so they really are part of L&D now. But yeah, so it's an interesting journey to take, but they were the two main things that we focused on to get that involvement and buy-in from the senior people.
Thank you, Stephen. Some really good stuff there. I'm going to come to Chris on this question in just a moment. Let's check in on the chat window. And so we've been talking about strategy. We've also, Martin says that the brand strategy first for L&D in your organisation, then focus on the communications. You have to think big for the L&D brand in order to resonate for all customers. And Paul later on said, love that, Martin, branding the L&D function, make some noise and instill confidence for staff to approach them. And Paul, I have made a note of your question from earlier on. We will get there. Martin said it was Nigel Harrison for performance consulting. Did I type Nigel Payne? I probably did. So apologies if I did that. I did type Nigel Payne. It's too many great Nigels around. That's what it is. Okay, so we're going to come to Chris on this point about going from order takers to kind of a different approach to L&D, and then we'll move on to a little bit about brand with Steph. So Chris, let's come to you on this question of how do we influence people to move away from that order taker
with the work
approach?
that we do with award entries, that is often a narrative. It's that as we've seen with the successful award applications by Stephen, is working in a business and going from order taker to a business-aligned business partner is a journey that we're seeing happening a lot, but it's still a lot of people yet to do it. And it is about, and I like the word Stephen used about consulting, it is, I think, to be perceived, and it's all about, with marketing, you always have to think about, it's not about the truth, it's about perception. And you need to be perceived as more of a management consultant and less of a delivery person. So sometimes it can be just simple as the job title, being a learning business partner or an HR business partner, and having a role and being positioned as their business partner sometimes carries a huge amount of weight. And it's the processes you follow, the discussions. The biggest thing to change people's perception of you as a function is the questions you ask. And particularly at the start of a journey, so that when someone says, oh, I want you to train my managers, and there's a really good Ashridge course, I want you to send them on. And just being brave enough to say why. Why them? Why do you need learning? What is the problem you're trying to fix here? What is the performance measures that you're trying to improve? Let's have a quick look at them. Which are the ones that we can deliver on? And actually asking questions and being much more consultancy-like changes perceptions. And then perceptions of the learners is a whole different thing. That's where you sort of getting them to buy into non-mandatory learning. That's completely different. That is much more mass marketing techniques you'll be applying about who are the demographics, what are their touch points. There's principles like technology adoption curve, which is fantastic to apply there, where you get the early adopters and the innovators and all these different profiles, and you have to build in good old marketing practices into that comms. But I would say for stakeholder stuff, which you're talking about, it's not about marketing, it's more about consultancy and picking up on consulting there and perception and positioning yourself and the discussions you have, is my view.
Thank you, Chris. I really love that last point about picking up on the consultancy part, because if we're not consultants, we're going to be the order takers. So I think it's really interesting that you've picked up on that. So thank you very much, Stephen and Chris, for your comments on that. Let's move into some other stuff that's coming up in the chat window. Zara's asked a really good question. Do you think that branding L&D might separate us from the rest of the organisation? No other internal functions feel the need to have their own brand within the organisational brand. I'm not really sure I agree with that, Zara. I think have seen that in businesses that I've worked in, but I'm interested to see what other people think too. So let us know in the chat window, what do you think about that point? But also Nigel Jones here, so I said there were loads of great Nigels, made a really good comment here about the concept of making the people in the field the star of the show. And this really hooks people into L&D and can help him as well. So, Steph, let's come to you on this one, because I think this is something that you can speak to a bit more. And what would you call that approach that Nigel's talking about?
Yeah, so Nigel has made a really good point there about making people the star of the show. And I think that is a really good way to continue engagement with your particular learning programme, because, we get the initial kind of spike of activity when you launch something, but how do you keep that interest going, over the course of a programme or a particular campaign? And using what is basically called evangelist marketing is a great way of doing that. And it is finding people who are using your product, using your service. You know, they've had some great benefits from your particular learning program. So go out and find those stars. You know, who's had a really great experience on your management development program, who's been promoted on the back of it, and, you know, get some testimonials, some case studies that you can really use to amplify the benefits and use them as part of a kind of ongoing sort of communication, almost like a drip campaign after the initial launch of a course, of a development program, to really showcase, you know, this is what impact this particular course is having, and here are some stars, and this could be you, so come and sign up.
That sounds pretty awesome, and I think that approach is really highlighting how the impact can be made, which is what we're talking about, on a very personal level. And why would I want to go and do this, and how can I make us feel good? Paul in the chat says, are we putting a lot of pressure on the L&D staff to have top-notch personal branding? How can we help them? Steph, let's start with you on this one. Personal branding, is this now too much pressure on us as individuals?
This is an interesting one, and I think whether L&D is aware of it or not, whether we're aware of it or not as individuals, your function, as an individual, you already have a brand, and that's the thing about brands. It's the way people view you, it's what people in your organisation already think about your products and your services. A brand is not just a logo and some nice imagery, it's how people feel about the products and the services that you're offering, and it's how people feel about L&D. So what I would say is, do you know how you are currently being perceived by your employees? What do they think about the quality of your learning services, and are you perceived in the way that you want to be? And if you're not, then it's time to start thinking about brand, and it's time to start thinking about how you can try and influence and improve those kind of brand perceptions that are out there. So brand is something that you can influence, but to the point about, you know, should we try and do stuff? You already have a brand, whether you're aware of it or not, so it's definitely something that you want to try and influence positively.
Sounds great, Steph. Thank you. And lots of really positive comments in the chat for you about really good points and stuff like that. So thank you very much for that in the chat. It's always good to hear. And Con says, we all need a brand in this digital world. Reputation, credibility and perception is driven by brand you. Thank you, Connor. I was just trying to work out what that actually was. We never worry about typing and spelling until I don't understand. So it's driven by brand you. And I think that's a really great point, internal and external. And actually those two things go together, because we learn so much from other people in our networks, in different industries, different businesses. Stephen, let's come to you next. I've unmuted you, Stephen. On this point about personal brand and stuff like that, you shared in the chat window that actually you've changed the names of the job titles of your staff. How has that helped?
We had some initial barriers when the guys got trained up to be performance consultants, because when they started asking the question, and Chris talked about it earlier, that, you know, why? They didn't really like that at first. The business were like, why are you asking us why? Just do a project management course or deliver some customer service training. So it was part of a kind of repositioning of the whole team, really. And so we repositioned the guys as consultants. We had to get some really quick wins in the bag. So where they were going out, understanding the business, talking to them about their real business drivers and what needles they wanted to see moved. And that, together with the rebranding of consultants, start to really move the way that we were seen with the senior guys in the business, and that's just continued, really, and it's gone from strength to strength. And we certainly don't have a problem with senior people coming to us now on a regular basis with actual business needs, rather than, can you do a course? So so that was one of the reasons we changed to consultants, really, and they really are seen now, and the people don't mind them stopping and saying why. They actually, it is actively encouraged now.
Sounds great, Stephen. Thank you. So I think it's always hard work to kind of change that perception, both internally for those individual, trainers as they were, and also outwards to the company. So it's a lot of different things that you have to do in one go. But it sounds like you've done really well there, Stephen. Thank you. Let's come to Chris now. Chris, let me unmute you. We had a question much earlier on in the chat that I want to turn to now. This is from Paul Gray. Paul says, I wonder what the speakers think about marketing L&D in a smaller business. Currently, I work in a business of less than 40 people, and it has no L&D or HR function. Now, that doesn't mean it's not working well. It doesn't mean it's a problem. Paul's not saying that. But in smaller companies, you don't usually have an L&D person.
About 15
so how do you handle that, Chris? What's your thoughts? What's your approach?
So we're a small business too. And we did have a full-time HR person, but it just didn't work out. And what we use now is a contractor to do it. And you can get some fantastic expertise. They don't have to be on payroll. The general accepted threshold for having a full-time HR person is 50 employees. And below that, we've got this fantastic lady who, she's in our Bournemouth office with us today, and she can do what a full-time learning development or HR person would do, and promote learning and make sure it's built into processes. My view on this one with smaller businesses is that, just picking up on Steph's point earlier, it's about having champions, and it's making sure that when you build in appraisals, even small businesses should have reviews, quarterly appraisals. We try and encourage people to have a monthly get out of the building, have a cup of coffee with someone sessions, and make sure that learning is part of the agenda. And the people, the managers, just have the equipment to do it. They are not L&D professionals, but they have to be in that conversation. So it's about having a process, giving them a budget, giving them a menu of courses to go on. And also seeing that training isn't necessarily about sitting in a classroom. It's about coaching, buddying. For us, any new starter, we've got a new starter this week, she will be an awards judge as part of her induction. She will go to an awards dinner as part of her induction. So it can be fun stuff, and it doesn't need to be a classroom. It can be about experiences. She needs to go to an awards dinner to feel the energy in the room and why our customers love winning awards so much. So that's why she's got to go to an awards dinner. She's probably been to some before, but it's just an excuse really. But so it's about getting your team leaders and your managers to understand what's the policy, what's the budget, what's the process, what's worked before, and get them to understand it. And a contractor can be your person who communicates it out to those managers using best practice. Because I understand L&D, but I'm not going to be the person people go to when they say, well, actually, my colleague needs to learn a new skill. But I absolutely agree. If you do nothing, then there will be no learning. And you can't expect the employees to come back to you and say, I want some training. So you got to force that conversation and make people excited about it. And we have fortnightly company catch-up calls, and that's often where we share stories like that. This person went on this story, and we have lunch and learn. So this is my favourite bit of training for small businesses, is a lunch and learn session, and it doesn't need to be formalised. It's just one person in the company is going to brief their colleagues on a topic that's close to their heart, and those are great with little businesses.
Absolutely. Yeah, and in the chat window, people are sharing some similar things. Thank you, Chris. Zara says, awesome. Some staff-led initiatives. We're currently supporting 30-minute learning sessions, which are actually run by staff, which is brilliant. Yeah. And Rachel says, showing off non-classroom training as a part of development is key. Absolutely right, Rachel. The Towards Maturity report, one of the many ones that they did, found that something like 48% of L&D professionals automatically just go straight to classroom training as the answer, as the solution. And Rachel's saying that she's in charge of HR, L&D, continuous improvement, and what's really helped her is to show the learning that is organically going on in the business as well as what I'm leading. Rachel, that is music to our ears. We love that. We'd love to hear more about it. If you want to drop John Kennard a little email or a tweet, we'd love to share some of your story as well to help other people. Okay, so let's have a look at some stuff that's come up in the chat and the questions. We're going to go to Steph on this one, then Stephen. There's a lot of stuff all wrapped up in this one thing, but I'm going to go through it and then we're going to pick out some bits to focus on. So a little bit earlier on in the chat, Rajana says, for my organisation, it's a case of how do we get people to continue to feel engaged in the learning post creating that initial noise. Often they lack of time and other work-related priorities seem to push learning out. How do we maintain engagement in the long term? And Rachel also says, well, we have had larger or longer term programs. We've worked to keep engagement up by getting buy-in from senior leadership. So there's one point. It will come to Steph in a moment, I promise. Nigel in the chat says, picking up on Rajana's point, I'm interested in the concept of a learning campaign for rolling out L&D. In the same way that marketing companies run campaigns, how can L&D run L&D campaigns to market the function or service we provide? And Con's picked up on that as well, so it's all really coming together very nicely. Con in the question and answer pod says, well, what does campaign learning mean and what can it be for us in L&D? So Steph, there's quite a few different things in there. Pick on one of those and let's start. Then we'll go to Stephen, then we'll go to Chris. Oh, and I should unmute you as well, Steph. That will help.
Oh, can you hear me? So yeah, what a lot of great questions we're getting here today. It's fantastic. So I wanted just to say a little bit about, I think someone was asking about getting buy-in from senior leadership, and obviously that is critical to the success of your learning programme, having those powerful influencers on board. And I just thought it would be helpful to share an example of where I've seen that working really well in practice. So we do quite a lot of work with Edrington, who are an international drinks brand. They make loads of premium whiskies, and they came to us to basically help them launch a brand new digital learning portal. So previously this organisation had no digital learning whatsoever. It was predominantly face-to-face. It was very piecemeal. And they wanted to, you know, try and kickstart a kind of culture where it was a bit more self-service for employees and they're not all just waiting to be sent on a training course. And that's a big kind of cultural change for an organisation to go through. And they knew that having that top level senior support for the programme, for the new digital programme, the new resource was absolutely critical. So what they did when they were thinking about initially launching the academy, it was called the Edrington Academy, they identified who are the sort of top sort of senior influencers across the business. So it's a group of about 300 people globally. And they really treated them as kind of VIPs. And they said to them, you know, we're going to be launching this great new digital resource. We want to give you a sneak peek. We want you to be the first to see this amazing new resource that we're going to be launching across the organisation. And they really built up engagement and interest with that group. And they were instrumental in then making it a success. They showed examples of how they could use it in practice. And then each of those leaders then had responsibility for then introducing it at their team meetings, you know, talking about how they had themselves used it to kind of improve their performance, the types of resources that they had found. And obviously there was a marketing campaign and a full global launch that came after that. But that pre-work that they did with those powerful influencers was absolutely critical to the success of that project, getting them on board, selling the benefits, showing them how they could use it themselves, and then having that trickle-down effect through the organisation, but building those ambassadors for your learning products. That was a really good example that actually won an award. Edrington won at the LPI Learning Awards a couple of years ago for that particular project and the way in which it was communicated.
Thank you, Steph. Some really good stuff there. And speaking again to Chris's point about awards and the impact that that can make, there's a great conversation in the chat going on about spaced learning. And Martin's making some continuous great points about brand and looking at your brand and where it fits and asking yourself questions and reflecting on things. So thank you so much for those points, Martin. That's really useful. Rachel says, space learning sounds like a great way to keep things going. Opens another tab on Google to research. Rachel, look up Donald Clark. Plan B is his blog, and he's got loads of stuff on space learning and space repetition. He's a great place to start. Stephen, let's come to you next on this one around this whole point about maintaining engagement.
Yeah, so keeping the learning alive and keeping the engagement is, I think that's probably the secret sauce, if you like. It's a combination of lots of things. For us, we were really lucky, and we still are, to have a really amazing marketing team on site. And the relationship we've built over the last few years is crucial to a lot of what we do. And I did notice that somebody in the chat box said about, is there a skill set for L&D in marketing? And I've got to tell you, my guys have learnt tons from our marketing team. And the marketing team have gone way beyond making our stuff look good. And they've taught our guys about skills around brand for our whole department, and brand for our individual interventions, how to manage campaigns, you know, and then beyond that, they've gone off and they've helped us apply for the awards. They've even got our training in the press, into local press. And what that does, it creates this sort of aspirational view of some of our interventions. So that, combined with the senior leadership and the CEOs being involved, it's in the papers. We have a brand, and people, they kind of want to be associated with the stuff we're doing. It makes it so much easier to get people sent on courses. And I think it was Chris earlier said you market through the people who are attending the courses, and we really try and do that. And yeah, was that Steph? Yeah, and what as well, Steph, another thing you said was around ambassadors. So what we've also done is we've got some great ambassadors for the stuff we're doing now, and oftentimes they're people who at the start might not have been so positive about the things we're trying to do, and they make the best ambassadors ever, and they can stand in front of people and talk about how they didn't believe this was going to work, and how they thought it was going to be a tick box exercise, and then they come out and say, this is amazing, it's worked, it's moved these needles for me, and we keep those guys really, really close. They do an amazing job for us. Then what you do is when you then make the job aids and you make the follow-up pieces of learning, people see the brand, they associate it, they know what it is, they know it's not just something that's pinging into their inbox. They latch onto it quickly, and they keep the learning alive that way. So yeah, that a couple of other things as well. Sorry, you know, in terms of like rewarding and recognizing. So we get all of the senior managers. We usually do nominations for the things we're trying to embed, and the senior managers nominate, and then we have at the big sort of events where we have lots and lots of people present, we get the people on stage, and we sort of keep it alive that way as well. And again, it links back to that aspirational aspect of the stuff we're doing. So yeah, pick the bones out of that.
I think we need a whole day for this topic. So Stephen, thank you, and some good stuff in the chat window. Colin is saying people love to be associated with successful brands, and if you can get your L&D brand up there, then the C-suite, the CEO, CFO, will seek you out, which is exactly what sort of Stephen's saying. So let's come to Chris for our kind of last comment on this before we move into our reflection piece and have a think about what we're going to do from this. Chris, the other part of this whole big kind of question
the campaign will be
conglomerate that we have.
Masses. So what I just want to pick up on there is that if you want to look at the campaign marketing, often it's good to look at the payroll and benefits team, because some of the best examples of internal marketing of an HR initiative that I've seen is actually for the launch of pension schemes and flexible benefit schemes. There have been some absolutely cracking stories there, and whenever it's a very, very popular topic for award entries, I have to say, and the Employee Benefits Awards are enormously popular and very competitive, and a deciding factor in success and a great entry is the internal comms, and there's some brilliant stuff, often because it's high budget, but it's very creative, but it's not necessarily applying the best practice that Steph and Stephen have been talking about. For example, they tend to focus a bit much on the funky giveaways and the posters, but they don't necessarily do it on a strategic way about looking at the needs of learners and the needs of the stakeholders. So I think there is better practice that we've seen a good L&D function doing. But I'd like to conclude on the one thing that's essential in all comms. I say one thing is it's three, and it's evidence, evidence, evidence. And we've heard, and I mean, Steph when she talks about ambassadors, and Stephen when he's talking about the comms. I'd like to say that by evidence, I don't just mean numbers. It's qualitative as well as quantitative evidence. So where the anecdotes, the testimonials, the heartwarming stories, those are still evidence. They're qualitative evidence. And so you need the senior leaders and the C-suite will generally lean towards quantitative, and the learners will lean towards qualitative. But it doesn't mean you do one to the exclusion of the other. So whether you're communicating to an awards judge, your C-suite, to the learners, to the sponsors and managers, they all need evidence. Evidence that it's a great learning experience, that it's delivering satisfaction, it's changing behaviour, it's delivering impact on business and society potentially as well. So all the things that good old Donald Kirkpatrick talks about is everyone's got their hot buttons about where, as Stephen puts it, the needle's moving. But it's just, you cannot make a claim when it comes to learning and development without backing it up with evidence. And that is the biggest problem, is people make these bold claims but just can't prove it to the skeptics. And a principle, going back to a question about what can L&D learn from marketing, well, the biggest thing is the technology adoption curve. And that is that if you launch something that isn't mandatory, you will get the innovators and the early adopters adopt it because it's funky and cool and new. The early majority, the late majority, and the laggards need evidence. They will not adopt anything unless you have proven to them that it's going to be worth their time. And that accounts for senior leaders supporting a program as well as learners attending it as well. So that's my personal big message, is it's all about evidence.
I love that point. And actually, Martin in the chat had said steer clear of spreadsheets and share stories and anecdotes. And in our private chat that we've got behind the scenes,
the emotional and rational side
give emotion.
is absolutely true, and you get different audiences.
So thank you very much for sharing that.
Different triggers.
And also,
with awards,
ahead,
the written entry is much more rational, and it's hard to inject the emotion into it. But the face-to-face second stage of your TJ Awards, you want to make the judges laugh, or better still, cry, and then you'll win. If you can make a judge cry, the award's in the bag. Preferably tears of happiness. It's one of those things. The stronger the emotion, the more likely the win. Definitely. Sorry, I'll let you get back.
I'm not sure I've cried in the award presentation. But yeah, I've definitely laughed. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Chris. Really appreciate those kind of points. We could talk ad infinitum about this topic. We are going to go into our reflection though. Our speakers are staying here. Do not panic. They're not going anywhere, but we are coming off of webcam. So just wave a little visual goodbye. And what we're going to do now is come into our reflection, or as I think Con said earlier on, the so what of learning. Before we do that, let's practice our tool. Have a look at the left side of your screen. You should be able to see that you have a T text tool. Let's practice using that. So just click on that T text tool, then click anywhere on the slide, type your name, and then click again, and it should reveal your writing. So let's have a quick practice of that. So you click on the T text tool on the left, click on the slide, type your name, and then click again. And you're doing absolutely fabulous, everyone. If you've written over the top of someone, do not worry. That first tool that somebody has found already, you click on that And what that will do is allow you to pick up and move any of the writing. So you can move things out of the way if you want to. If for some reason it doesn't work for you, don't worry, you can just use the chat window. That's absolutely fine. Okay, you guys have got this down pat now. You're absolutely brilliant. So let's go into the actual question. So what's your action point from today? We've had a great discussion, loads of absolutely great points shared. But so what? What are you going to do with it? Where are you going to go with it now? So have a think, use that T-text tool, and just drop something on that whiteboard, or if you prefer, in the chat window, that's absolutely fine too, if you prefer that. You don't have to put your name if you don't want to. But what are you going to do next? We've had great stuff today. What is it that you are going to do next? So I can see a couple of comments here. Just when you finish typing, just click on that whiteboard and it will reveal your writing. Don't worry if you write on the top of someone else. We've got that move tool. We can move things around. So the very top one says the C-Suite Love Awards. Get your entries in. I think I can firmly say that was Chris, that one. Thank you, Chris, but you're absolutely right. Somebody's put read the Udemy white paper. That's a good one. That's what Steph had told us about, and I just shared that in the main chat for you. Recognise the value of evidence produced from early adopters. That's a really good one. 2 priorities for me. See which senior sponsors we can get on board and how we can work on our branding. Thank you so much. Talk to our marketing department about how they can assist my learning campaign. Brilliant. It's all about making those links and helping each other out. Because they can probably learn some things from you as well. So that's great to develop that relationship. Promote L&D business partners. Now that sounds interesting. I'd love to know a little bit more about that. Be the L&D evangelist in my small business. Oh, I love that point. The L&D evangelist. What a great term. We've got 2 points down the bottom here. Develop my L&D campaign plan. So that's a really good idea about kind of how are you going to use these marketing tactics for a campaign. And the last one on the whiteboard, focus on building a brand for my team and how we can be represented by this to make sure our initiatives are represented. What a brilliant way of sharing that. Thank you so much. Well, a late entry we have in here is find out what the perception of L&D is in the wider organisation and develop an L&D campaign with SMT, I'm not sure what SMT is, subject matter, maybe something like that. But develop a campaign with SMTs. Senior management team. Thank you, John Kennard. Oh, I knew somebody would know. There's always somebody here much cleverer than me. Find out what the perception of L&D is in the wider organisation and develop an L&D campaign with the senior management team that I've just learnt and the marketing team. Celebrate the learners and their evidence. That's a really great point as well. And marketeers are experts in changing behaviour via campaign approach. Absolutely brilliant. Let's come to each of our speakers for a final short comment on what we've been speaking about today. So Chris, let me unmute you. Loads of great stuff there. And you did say that wasn't you that put that awards quote in, but you do agree.
Yeah, my microphone's gone green now. Can you? Yeah, it's gone white.
Chris, I've unmuted you.
Yeah, so I do love awards, but I know they're a bit of a Marmite subject.
We'll come back to.
But the one thing that it definitely leads to awards as well as recognition is the evidence of impact and that journey. I would just say the journey to evaluation. Evaluation isn't something you do at the end. It's something you start at the beginning. And whether you call it a diagnostic or an objective setting exercise or a needs analysis, it's all evaluation, and there's no too soon when it comes to aligning your learning and development to business and measuring the impact.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Chris. And I really like that point about the about the evaluation starts at the beginning. You need to plan it in at the beginning. Stephen, you've got these kind of ideas here of what people are going to do after today. What's your final thought and comment?
Hello? Sorry, my microphone
Stephen, I've
had
unmuted
disconnected.
you. Gosh, those mute gremlins are back again, aren't they?
Hello. Yeah, so yeah, get into the business is probably the key message from me. Get L&D as part of the commercial business and work as partners with them. You want to pump out that good news, but it's got to be their good news, not L&D's good news. Some L&D good news, obviously, but you know, get on a stage with your key customers and talk about all the great successes. You know, especially those ambassadors and those real life stories, because that's what people want, and then what you're doing becomes aspirational.
Love it. Thank you, Stephen. I said earlier on, I love that term, aspirational. And Steph, what are you seeing here? What's your final thoughts? Oh, I promise we've all unmuted. We've obviously got some kind of audio issues, but I'm sure Steph will connect her audio in just a second. Apologies that we've had a couple of audio issues today. You never can tell with the joy of technology, but at least we're here. Steph, are you there?
So my final thoughts are that, you know, marketing your L&D initiatives really comes down to good communication. So don't forget to think about all the different communication channels that you've got at your disposal that are available to get your message out, whether it's email, whether it's, you know, company webinars like this, whether it's team meetings, newsletter on the internet. Take advantage of every communication channel that you possibly can to amplify your message.
Absolutely fabulous, Steph. Really well said, as is everybody. Thank you so much to Chris, to Stephen, to Steph. What absolutely brilliant speakers we've had today. They've shared some stuff that I've certainly learned a lot from. I really hope you have. And according to what you were sharing on that whiteboard, you certainly did. I'm sharing all of their websites and their Twitter handles in there. So thank you so much for your time today, guys. That's been really, really useful. Now, our recording of our webinar, you know it's going to be available on our website. And also you can register for our next webinar as well. We've got coming up Learning to Learn in December. I think that will be a really interesting one. And my favourite, absolute favourite webinar of the year is our virtual Christmas party, 4 p.m. UK time, 18th of December. Bring the gin and tonics, bring the Prosecco, bring the tinsel, and let's have an absolutely fun time. So thank you everybody for all of your time today. Go on to Twitter, share with us what your thoughts are, what it is that you want to take away, what it is that you're going to do. Do go and share that on #TJwow. We hope to see you at our next webinar and the virtual Christmas party. That will be great fun. And thank you again to our speakers. And most of all,